the last thing we need to do here is to take our main page where we're displaying the data, and for each runner do a query on the activities and find all of the activities for that runner and then display them. So let's see here. We've got the runner, and now what I'm going to do is right in here, right, for each runner, let me write a little comment to myself, is query activities to find activities for the current runner. That is right, the current one in this loop. So what I need to do is, for the current runner, I need to get its ID. Well, I actually sort of know how to do that already, right? We did that when we generated our string. Runner.key.id is the runner ID. All right, so we've got the runner ID. Store that. I know I'm going to need that to do my query. So now we're going to do a query kind of like we did before, right, where we did with runner. We will make a activity query, and again we start by saying the class name .all, but now we're going to add a filter. And the way you do a filter is you take your query object and you call its filter method. The filter method takes two parameters. The first is essentially the logical condition that we want to check. And the typical thing to do is to take a field and check to see that it's either equal to something or less than something or greater than something. And what we want to do is say, I want to find only those instances of the activity class where runner ID is equal to, and what is equal to or less than or greater than is a second parameter. And that's just going to be equal to the runner ID that we just calculated. So now we have a full query. If we want to, we can order these by date as well. Maybe that's nice. So order by date, which is the activities all have a date. And now we can go through, and for each activity in the query, we'll generate some HTML and print it out. So why don't we make an unordered list for all of the activities, and each activity will be an element of that list. So we'll go ahead and write a little bit of HTML, unordered list, and then we'll close this by saying end unordered list. And within that list, we're going to iterate. So we'll go ahead and say for activity in, again we can use their activity query and call its run method, and that generates the list of all of the activities. Right? This is really doing a database query. And now we can go ahead and generate a string that we will use for HTML. So we'll write out first some HTML that says we're going to have a list element, and then we'll add a string which is the activity itself. We need activity to generate a string, so we'll go ahead and write that bit of code. This time I'll put it in the right place. In the activity class, I'll go ahead and implement a __str method. Okay, I've written an str method. I'm going to have the date, the distance, and duration. Go back to our main. We have our outer loop that's iterating over our runners, and our inner loop that's iterating over all the activities for each runner. Well, maybe this will work. Let's go back to our home page, refresh, cross your fingers, and well, as usual, we have some error. So let's go ahead and see if we can figure out what it is. Let's start by looking at the log console, and there aren't any errors over here, so whatever the problem is, that doesn't seem to be it. Let's just refresh this one more time. Alright, so called get / no errors. So we've got some kind of problem, so we'll have to go look at our source code and see if we can figure it out. So the issue is that runner ID in our runner class in the database is a string, but the ID method returns a number, an integer, and so what we need to do is convert this into a string because otherwise what it was doing is it was doing a filter across data types, and it wasn't finding any that satisfied, and so we weren't getting any activities that met the requirements, the filter, and so we weren't getting any. Run this again. Getting closer. So if we go to our little print statement here, Python won't automatically convert an activity into a string with concatenation. And so what we need to do is manually do this by converting it into a string. One more time. And finally, we've got it. Here are Peterson's activities, all on the 17th, and we've got all this data correctly. And here are Talk's activities. He ran the 13-miler. And it's not very pretty, but I think we've got all the functionality we want. And if you want to make it prettier, well, you can go and play around with the generated HTML. But what we've got now is a pretty sophisticated program. We have a data model with a runner and activity that are linked, right? The activity uses a runner ID that comes from the runner. We have some special functions that respond to URL requests for adding data into the database. And we have a home page that dumps the contents of the database. And finally, we have URL mappings that say which URLs are associated with which handler. There's obviously a lot more that we could do with this, but we have got the essence of modeling, persistent data storage, and web page access for modifying and retrieving data. And that is going to be enough for us to start implementing some fun projects ourselves in the homeworks. One last thought is, if you want to learn more, where do you go? And the answer is always to the Google Docs. So let me point you to a couple of good places. One is just search for GAE is actually a good way to search in Google for query, and that will give you to the query class. And the query class will describe the different things you can do, including the filter method and the run method. Those are particularly useful ones. And one other thing that is really important to know about are what are the data types that you can use in your model. So to look at that, let's search for GAE, data property. Here, there we go. Types and properties. I think this is the right page. Here we go. And this is a table of all of the types you can use in your model. We've looked at a few, such as string and float, but if you look around here, you'll see there's all kinds of other things you can put in as well.